Another brilliant day for England, a string of words I didn't think I'd say a few days ago. Joe Root scored his third 100 in as many tests as England finished the day with a monster lead of 345. Anna Forsyth asks, Joe Root, discuss. Well, before I go to you, Ben, I'll reel off a few stats. So with 5 tests to go in 2021, he's 405 runs away from Mohammed Yusuf's all-time record for the most runs scored in a calendar year. No Englishman has ever scored more hundreds in a calendar year as Root has now. That's 6. He now averages more than Viv Richards in Test cricket. Ben, Root was on a completely another level today.
Yeah, he was, because actually, as has been the case throughout the series, and for England only really wasn't the case yesterday, there's been that trade-off between scoring freely and scoring heavily. And I mean, a lot of them haven't managed to either. But Root just he did just come in and look just like he did that thing where he just gets to 30 like in an instant, and you look up and he's there and he's just ticking along, and he's doing that again. I guess the like if you're comparing it to other hundreds this year, there was obviously less pressure this time, but this felt like the most pure Joe Root innings in it felt like a very typical, like when he was in his previous pomp in 2014, which this has to now surpass really. We are now seeing peak Root for sure, and that was actually just a prelude, I think. In that, yeah, he was busy all the time. He was putting pressure back on the bowlers because he wasn't letting any of them settle. And England did need it to an extent. I mean, they were almost out of sight when he came in, but not quite. It was 159 for 2, which I looked up. That's his best ever platform at number 4, which feels like it should be a bit higher. But that shows how England have struggled. But if they had ended up 250 all out, there's definitely a route back into the game for India there. But England are surely out of sight now, right?
Yeah, we'll get onto that in a second. But I think you make quite a good point about the state of the day, not really the game, but the state of the day when Root came in. Mm-hmm. England went nowhere in that first session. Burns and Hamid were scoring really slowly. Malan upped the ante a little bit when Malan came in. But England were not really going anywhere, and India were bowling quite well. And I almost thought that Root is almost like Kohli's worst nightmare as a captain, in that Kohli likes to keep the pressure on the batting side for as long as possible. India tried to stifle the flow of runs on quite a flat wicket at the start of the day, and it's impossible to do that with Root in this kind of form. The classic cliche of Root of you look up, he's on 30. Within 15 minutes, the whole momentum of a session changes when Root is in that kind of mood. Tom Evans asks, why am I nervous? It's good to see a bit of English pessimism. England did gift India with a few wickets in that evening session. Moeen, Butler and Curran all going with pretty loose shots. If any team is capable of getting themselves into 340 run lead at home and then blowing it away, it would be England. But Ben, you think the game's pretty much done?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that the highest first innings lead to be overturned to win a game is lower than 300. And England are obviously well above that, and will hopefully add a few more tomorrow. So it's obviously very unlikely. I guess the one thing we were discussing this earlier actually, that like 300 run leads are overturned because it's a very hard thing to do, but also because the chance to do that doesn't come along very often. You don't get 300 run leads very often full stop, but you also don't get them when there are still 3 days left in the test. So there is theoretically a chance that India take those last 2 wickets quickly, make 550, and then skittle England for 180 or whatever. That is just about feasible, but lots of things have to happen for that to happen. So it is still very unlikely. So it should still be interesting over the next couple of days. But I think the real missed opportunity isn't so much that England aren't going to win this game, which they really should. It's that England kind of had a chance. I know they've made quite a lot of runs, but if they end up batting until tea tomorrow, you really do tire those Indian bowlers. And you saw actually, Shami's pace was, I know he took the most wickets of any Indian bowler, but his pace was down a reasonable amount in this test from the last game. Ishant Sharma just bowled poorly in general, looked like he was having issues with his run up. They were suggesting on Sky that perhaps running down the hill was the issue, and he almost felt like he was running in too quickly, so he was then slowing himself down and he didn't have any rhythm coming through. That's possibly true, but then also it could just be a bit of fitness, a bit of tiredness issue. And if England could put 6 sessions in those bowlers' legs rather than 4 and a bit, that can make quite a big difference come the 4th and 5th test. And so they've missed a little bit of an opportunity there, even though they should still win this game quite comfortably.
Ramos, do you think the pitch is progressively getting easier to bat, or is it just India bowlers were below par today? I thought they were below par yesterday evening. I thought it gave England a lot of freebies. They started the day pretty well. But I think the one thing that, England, I don't think will be dreading bowling again on this pitch. It's still got a decent pace in it. It's still nipping off the seam. I mean, the deliveries that Shami bowled to get rid of Burns and the delivery that Bumrah bowled to get rid of Root, they seemed off the pitch at a good pace, and Jadeja got a bit of turn. Again, delivery, they got Hamid. There's a bit of spice in that. So, yeah, I think the pitch is good. It's a very good pitch. I think, as we said yesterday, India fell. There were some loose shots, but also conditions were just very bowler friendly, but the overhead conditions rather than the pitch. So, I think India were okay today, with the exception of Ishant Sharma, which I think is quite interesting. Ishant bowled really poorly. Actually, it wasn't just a run up. He just didn't look confident. He's losing his wrist position as well. I thought he was really searching for that in-swinger. Ben, you almost think already you're unlikely to see Ishant in the next Test match.
Yeah, possibly. I guess the thing is that he's been so good for such a long time that he'll have built some faith up. And in a way, the drop-off is so dramatic that you wonder actually if it could come back just as quickly almost, if there is a second innings, I guess that's pretty unlikely. But that, in the nets, they're able to say oh, you're just doing this one thing wrong. It's oh yeah, and then he's back to being as good as he has been before. If this was sort of a slow decline to the position where he is now, that would be almost more likely. But actually, this could well just be a freak innings on a ground that he doesn't like very much, rather than something that means that he has to sit out. But I do wonder if, in India they didn't just get away with not having a functioning tail at Lord's, that they actively won the game, but that was a freak performance. And if, having seen how they got blown away in the first innings here, that will mean that they kind of think they want a little bit of batting depth, and whether that's Thakur or Ashwin, it could well be that Ishant is the guy to sit out. They might well just think as well that because they have bowled a lot of overs in this game and also in the series now at this point. That it wasn't England batted for quite a long time at Lord's as well, at least in the first innings. That they could do with a bit of rest and rotation. Like Umesh Yadav is a very skillful, very good bowler. We could see a couple change that pace attack, possibly. But you're right, they did bowl generally okay and pretty well. And I think you saw the effect of that on Hamid in particular. I don't know if you're going to ask about him, but he's because he obviously batted very well on the second evening, but he got a lot of freebies from Ishant Sharma in particular, short wide balls that he put away well. And even with those, by the end of the day, he was still scoring at a strike rate of under 50. So it's almost as if if you're being ultra critical, it seems at the moment as if he needs those freebies to have an even acceptable scoring rate. And if he doesn't have those, actually he doesn't have too many ways, doesn't have too many boundary options that he can sort of manufacture for himself in the way that Joe Root does. Obviously not everyone can be Joe Root, but still that's where you see that trade-off coming in. The one thing he did very well yesterday was to tip and run with Rory Burns, and he couldn't find the options there. I think he scored 8 off 65 balls today, which if Sibley was doing it, people would be calling for his head. Obviously, to me, it's a bit of credit from that 60 last night, but I think that we should I think the main thing is Hamid didn't do too much wrong. There's not too much to be worried about in him having a passage where he scores a bit slowly and then gets out. He batted well, he did more than did his job. I think we need to temper our expectations that Hamid is going to have lots of innings where he starts slowly. He is still a young opener who is sort of finding his way a bit. He's going to have low scores. He's not yet the finished article. He could well be a very, very good test opener for England. But as fans and as pundits, there's going to need to, and as being a team manager, there's going to need to be time put in and sort of, you need to make peace with the fact that he's not there yet, I think. So I think that I think that's just calm down a little bit, despite how good he looked yesterday, and just think that he could be very good. And for now, let's just accept what he is, I think.
Yeah, I was always a defender of Sibley's strike rate. I thought the criticism of his scoring rate was overblown. The one thing I'd say on Hamid today is it reminded me a little bit of Sibley in the first 2 tests of the series, where the problem wasn't that he was in first gear, it was that it looked like he didn't have a second gear and that he was kind of patting back half volleys, and it's fine to not score in the V. Cook didn't score very many runs in the V, and he did okay. But it was more, I've got a sense that I wasn't really sure if the bowlers were going to pitch it up outside off stump. I think the bowlers felt pretty safe doing that. And equally to really short deliveries aimed at, the chest upwards, Hamid was just ducking everything. He wasn't really taking on anything. And Burns in 2019 against the Aussies had a good defensive game against the short ball, but didn't really have the pull shot. And the Australians kind of felt that they could just bowl short at him with very little consequence. So that's the only worry I'd have there. But yeah, I thought he batted really well yesterday. And then just finally, Ben, on Malan, I thought it was really impressive today. His highest score in England is out in very strange fashion. Pan didn't even appeal for the caught behind, but I really liked how positive he was in his first stint at the side, in home test in particular. He was actually very negative, which might be a bit of a surprise given his prowess in the shorter formats and how he batted today. But he wasn't like that at all. He upped the tempo after a very sedate first hour. I guess he'll go to bed tonight a bit frustrated given that the 100 one was there for the taking the way he was batting.
Yeah, I mean, you could see because when that review went up, he knew instantly that he'd hit it. And you could see it on his face. And he was just kind of hoping for an ultra edge sort of malfunction or something that was going to save him. But he still stuck around to see he wasn't going to be walking for anyone. And obviously, fair enough, why should he? But as just kind of showed how, because there was 100 there for the taking, but he did play very well. And actually, as the rest showed, I think him and Root made it look a bit easier than it actually was. I think, especially in that T session when they kind of ran India ragged. There was some really nice sort of crunchy, meaty cover drives, and he looked better in England than he did in that first in the side. You're right, and I don't know if that's just a form thing or if he has gone away and worked on things, but that is a box ticked. And actually, considering that England were already probably considering about taking him to the Ashes, that must be his place booked there now. It's interesting. I was thinking back to that series, because this is Malan's first innings at home at number 3, and obviously you're so used to seeing him back there for England T20. I was thinking, like, why is that? And actually, because obviously it was Tom Westy at number 3 and Malan at number 5. And thinking back now, that just seems like so obviously the wrong way around. Like, you've got the guy's so good against pace, put him at number 3 and put the sort of leg side wizard at number 5. But that's not the way that it was at the time, and I'm sure there was a good reason for it.
For 4 years ago.
Yes, true. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
We had quite a few questions about Ben's hair again, so I thought I'd take my hair tie out to just remind people of my own luscious locks. But anyway, that is all we have time for today's show. Thanks for the questions as always. If you want to ask some questions for tomorrow's show, leave them in the comments or ask them to us on Twitter. Cheers.